Hello and welcome back to Fist Entertainment for day 4 of the event known as the Dune Chronicles, which will be for episode 3 of the Emmy Award-winning miniseries, Frank Herbert's Dune, which turns 24 years old this year. Alright, well, previously on Dune, we saw Paul Atreides and Lady Jessica meet the Fremen, and Paul become a Fremen leader by the name of Muad'Dib, and how he created a warrior faction known as the Fedaykin to battle it with the Harkonnens as well as the Emperor, and bring down the spice production to draw the Emperor out so that Paul Atreides can embrace his destiny. And of course, the mention that he might indeed be a prophet, it may actually be the Messiah that has been foretold by the Fremen leader known as Liet. And it ends basically with Paul Atreides having disturbing visions of the future, in which we see a horrific future full of blood shed and chaos and mayhem. Death upon which the world has never seen. But, as they say, the saga of Dune is far from over. Which brings us on to chapter 3 of the what I still consider the most faithful adaptation of the Frank Herbert novel, Frank Herbert's Dune, the miniseries. This is the director's cut. In this episode, we go ahead and see how tragedy is never far away. It is a revelation, of course, in episode 2, is that Chani is pregnant with Paul's firstborn son. Well, we see what happens to Paul's firstborn son when the Emperor Sardaukar slaughtered his few months old son, almost a year, I say about a year, maybe a little bit over a year old son, gets brutally slaughtered by the Emperor Sardaukar. In fact, this is probably the only adaptation out of all adaptations of the Frank Herbert novel in which they actually address that Paul and Chani had a son in the first novel, and that their son was brutally murdered by the Emperor. No other adaptation of Dune has ever addressed it, but this one. Much like no other adaptation of Dune has ever addressed that Dr. Kynes is Chani's father, which of course we figured out in episode 2 of the miniseries, titled Muad'Dib. Now, the title of episode 3 is The Prophet, which is very well orchestrated that it would be called that, because basically, much like it is in every adaptation, Paul eventually embraces his destiny of becoming Dune's Messiah, becoming the Mahdi. But things are a little different in this one than the other adaptations. Which brings to stuff that we can talk about here. Now, something that's never addressed in the 1984 film is the political marriage of Paul Atreides to Princess Euron, the Emperor's Daughter. That's not even talked about in the 1984 film, in either cut of it. It is in the new adaptations in the two-part movie from 2021 to 2024. It is talked about in that. But the way they go about it is so different in that. The way it is in the novel is exactly the way it is in this. It's a political marriage. And we'll get to the problem I have with that particular that particular change, taking liberties with the story's narrative in Dune Part 2 in 2024. I will address it in more detail when it comes to reviewing that film. But it's a political marriage, which means that as far as anybody is concerned, only by politics is the princess's daughter. Sorry, take it back. Wow, I don't know why I said that. But the emperor's daughter, the princess. The princess is only Paul Atreides' wife for only one particular reason, so that he can become the emperor. So he can overthrow the emperor and become the new emperor. That is quite literally the only reason why he marries her. She is not really at all what he truly considers to be his wife. He truly considers his wife to be Channing. And that's in the novel, and that's definitely in this miniseries. So I will address it in much more detail, but they definitely don't do that in Dune Part 2. And that's part of the issue, is the changes they did in these two films. Now, I will say, and keep in mind, we have a long way to go before we get there. We have 3 more days of reviews to do before we actually get to Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. But the changes are just, some of them are just unacceptable to me. But with that said, I absolutely love and adore these 2 new films. I definitely adore them. I actually love them. I had probably one of the best cinema experiences I've ever had watching Dune Part 2 in IMAX. And we'll talk about that as well once we get to that film. But let's talk about some more of the interesting changes that they did in the previous, predecessor to the miniseries, as well as the successors in the 2 films compared to this miniseries. Really, the biggest difference, and this is something that I will talk about, this is actually interesting. The Wielding Way, which is, in a lot of ways, in the novel, the main reason why the Fedaykin even exist. Fremen from all over came to learn the Wielding Way. And that's how the Fedaykin was developed. And that's definitely addressed in the miniseries, and it's also addressed in the 1984 film. It's just not in the 2021 and 2024 movies. It's just not there. But it definitely is addressed in both the 84 film and the 2000 miniseries. But there's only one adaptation that actually was faithful to the novel. And interesting enough, it's not this. It's actually the 1984 film that got it right. In the novel, the Wielding Way has to do with actually using wielding modules and using the power of voice to blow things up. And so that sequence in the movie Dune from 1984, to where it's almost impossible to break this hardest rock that they have on Dune, the hardest rock substance they have, and then you have Paul using his voice in that wielding module and blowing the rock up. That is literally taken from the pages of the book. So What I'm trying to get out with all that is that there is not a 100% faithful adaptation of Dune that exists. But there's truly not a completely unfaithful adaptation of Dune that exists either. There are elements in the 1984 film that are taken directly from the book that is very faithful. There are many more in the miniseries. And believe it or not, even with the changes, the least faithful of the three is probably the 84 film. There is a big debate going out there around the community is which is more faithful, this 295-minute miniseries, is that the most faithful we have, or is it the 321 combined runtime between the two new films? I still believe firmly that this is, because the changes that they make are acceptable. A lot of changes that they make in the two new films, in some ways, are not acceptable. But here's another one that's very interesting. And like I said, this goes back and forth. So wrapping this up on this mini-series, before we take a break from, the first novel and start to expand our horizons into, talking about the adaptations of the second and third novels in the Dune Chronicles book series, I do want to address one thing that really does give the new Dune films an edge, is they got the Baron Harkonnen right. The Baron Harkonnen, the best adaptation of the Baron Harkonnen. The only problem there is with the Harkonnen portrayal in, the two new films is this whole black and white planet thing and this all bright atmosphere, and why do you have pale white skin and they're all bald and all this stuff, is definitely not from the book. But what is the whole Elizabeth Balfour thing that he has going on. In the novels, or to just say novel, plural, the Baron Harkonnen does drain victims of blood into a tub, and he does bathe himself in the blood of people that he's slain. That actually is in the book. But interesting enough, this is what gives the two new Dune films quite an edge. And I don't mind talking about the two new Dune films while I'm talking about all this, because, and I'll give you guys a little bit of an idea, when I get to Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, I'm going to spend a whole lot less time talking about what I don't like about it, and I'm going to spend more time just doing a generic review in a lot of ways, in, talking about my personal experiences enjoying those films, as opposed to, talking about the lore of Dune like I've been doing for the past now going on 4 days. Because in my opinion, it makes more sense to do that with this miniseries in this sequel miniseries, because you can really explore the lore of Dune with, in the world of Dune with that. You don't necessarily have to do that with these two new Warner Brothers films. But what the Warner Brothers films do get right is that the Baron Harkonnen does not float in the air, and he does not fly around on a device. Because of how obese he is, he has to have mechanical things connected to his body so he can stand up straight and move around. And so he mostly hovers on the ground as opposed to walking on the ground. That's something that they really did get right. So when it comes to the functions of his mechanical suit, in his bloodlust to go ahead and bathe in blood he gutted from people, bringing them of their blood into a tub, is 100% accurate to the novel. So this tells you that, like I said, there is no such thing as a unfaithful adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune. when you pick apart every adaptation of that first book, there's always something accurate. There's always something very accurate, no matter which version of the first book that you watch on the screen. They're all very, very accurate. Some more accurate than others, but there is no such thing as an inaccurate, completely unfaithful adaptation of the Frank Herbert novel. All of them have something that's accurate to the book. And it's fun picking them apart and seeing, what is in this version of Dune, what is in that version of Dune, what is in this version of Dune, and it's really cool to pick it apart. And that's what's so fun about, doing these reviews I've been doing for a while. And that's basically what I have to say about that. Now, the overall experience of returning to the world of Dune from 2000, I will let you know, the first time I've watched this, basically in a lot of ways, is over the past 3 days, including the night. And I really have forgotten how great this miniseries is, and how great the storytelling is, and just how mythical and magical this miniseries is. And it's definitely a miniseries which I think that Lionsgate, who owns Arneson Entertainment, so Lionsgate actually owns this. They just, for some odd reason, they are sitting on this. And what annoys me is they did do a 4K restoration. It was not released in a UHD 4K format. If it was, everybody could get this thing. Because, like I said before, 4K is universal when it comes to region. It is not locked to any region at all. So you could buy a 4K release from anywhere in the world, and it will play on any 4K player. But at the very least, what I think that Lionsgate should do is make a remastered version of this in the United States of A through Vestron Video. Vestron Video is a catalog title through Lionsgate that takes old cult classics and breathes new life into them, making a basically a very exclusive collector's edition series. I happen to own quite a few Vestron Video releases. I've even reviewed some of these Vestron Video releases on this channel. And so I think it's time that Lionsgate took this miniseries as well as this sequel miniseries and went for the Vestron line and released them for a modern audience, so we can actually at some point have a real, true, definitive way to watch these two miniseries. And I will definitely get more into that, likely, when we get into Children of Dune tomorrow night. But the one of the things I really enjoy about this is you can actually believe that this whole pre-Holy War that goes on in the first novel of Dune does take place over the course of 3 years. You see, one of the liberties they took with Dune Part 2, not necessarily Part 1, but Dune Part 2, which is like the body and conclusion of the novel, which is a little different from this because, the first episode is the introduction of the story, and episode 2, yesterday, is the body, and this episode I watched today is the conclusion, and it's more drawn out. Dune Part 2, 2024, you had the body in conclusion of the novel right there. And they made the stupid decision to go ahead and make this whole freaking, Arrakis War before we have our Holy War, which spans 12 years and it affects the entire universe in between Dune and Dune Messiah, as opposed to, the battle that is in Dune, which, supposed to take place over 3 years, but they decided to make the decision to make it take place over 3 months, and it just screws everything up. One of the big differences with Dune Part 2 is the bad decision not just to keep Paul and Channing's firstborn son out of the whole story, but keeping Alia within Jessica's wound. A lot of what makes the concluding parts of Dune so mythical and interesting is the birth of Alia, Paul's younger sister. And Dune Part 2 is the only adaptation that doesn't do that. But like I said, we'll get to Dune 1 and Dune 2 after we go for Children of Dune. And we're at pretty much 21 minutes now. But I don't mind because you know this is my channel, and apparently you guys don't mind having a little bit longer videos, apparently. But I will try to keep it shorter when we get into Children of Dune. But that's all I really have to say about this very cool miniseries, and about what I call episode 4 of my Dune Chronicles event. And I hope you guys have been enjoying this journey. And I will see you guys for the 5th day of the Dune Chronicles for Children of Dune episode 1, known as Muad'Dib's Second Crusade. Until then, if you have not checked out Frank Herbert's Dune from 2000, I say check it out, and I'll see you guys next time.